welcome to my show Indus Cuisine, and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. We're back with another new episode from the heart of Pakistan. Today's recipe is very easy, and I can bet you've never heard about it in your life when it comes to Pakistani food if you do not live in Pakistan. We're making brain masala today. Yes, you've heard it right. We're making brain masala. The brain we're using today in this recipe is the cow brain. It's very easy and it dates back to the time when basically the religion Islam came to Pakistan. Why? Because this recipe came to fame when Pakistanis started observing the holiday of Eid-ul-Adha. That is the holiday in which we sacrifice an animal in the name of God, and then we as a family, as friends, and we bring the poor together and we cook for everyone and we give out the meat of the animal that was sacrificed. This recipe came back from that day. Why? Because back in the day when you used to slaughter the animal, everything from the animal was used. Nothing went to waste. Even the hide, the skin was used for, obviously everyone knows the cow hide is used as leather, and all the other things were used for the food. And even if you talk about the bone that you can get from the cow, the bone marrow was used in recipes such as nihari, which I've taught you. And in Pakistan, when you go buy nihari, you can always buy some goat brain or bone marrow with it. Today's recipe is very easy and the ingredients are very simple, but it needs to be executed in a very simple yet proper way. So the ingredients today are, two of the vegetables we're using are tomatoes and one onion. Then we'll be using spices such as turmeric, salt, ginger, garlic, dried red chili, cumin powder, black cardamom, sage leaves. Then we'll be using green chilies, yogurt towards the end. We'll be using clarified butter for this, around 5 to 6 tablespoons, black peppercorns, and 2 pieces of cow brain. So now remember, whenever you're using cow brain, it won't go in the recipe or in the dish directly. You need to blanch it in boiling hot water for a minute. What will happen is the strong flavor of the brain will go out and it will be nice, fresh, and you will enjoy it. If you go buy this goat brain or cow brain, both of them are used in recipes from a food street stall. You'll usually see the person making it on a very, very big pan. He'll add water, boil it, pick the brain up, drain the water out, and then continue the recipe on that pan only. But because we will do it in a very nice, hygienic way, in a proper way, we'll be using different types of pots and pans and utensils so that we do not have cross-contamination in our kitchen over here. So firstly, what you need is, you need a wok. Place it on the basically stove and you bring it to heat. So when the water comes to heat, you need to boil the brain for maximum 1.5 minutes to 2. So I'll just add the water, give it a lid and let it boil. Remember one thing, if you place a lid on top, the water will boil quickly. Why? Because it becomes like an oven, the heat is insulated. And if you take the lid off, it will take a little more time. And if you want to save time, always, have a pan with a nice lid, which is always, you could say, partially airtight. Why? Because some of steam goes out. The remaining amount of steam always quickens up the process of cooking, and also you can control the evaporation in the pan or in the wok you're using for cooking. Okay, so now what you need to do is, we'll change the board. Why? Because first the water needs to come to boil. So we'll pick up a green board. The green board should always be used for vegetables. Why? Because we will always avoid cross-contamination. Remember that. Why? Because a healthy lifestyle will always take you a very long way in life. Okay, so first thing what we'll do is, we'll bring a pan and let's say I'll pick up a large pan, I'll bring it to heat, and we shall saute the onions till light brown. Now remember, translucent, light brown, and then comes brown. We want the light brown texture. Why? Because the flavor changes as the color changes of the onion. Remember that. I'll always keep telling you this. Why? Because if I tell you properly, then only you can cook properly. So what I'll do first is, I'll add the clarified butter to the pan, and as the pan will come to heat, the butter shall start melting. We also call this ghee in our language, but please remember, clarified butter is different from the normal butter, or you could say the French butter you get in the market. The flavor is different, the fragrance is different, and you cannot substitute it with that. But if you cannot find clarified butter, what you can do is, you can add oil. But first of all, what oil will you add? Usually in Pakistani cooking, we use sunflower oil, corn oil, and these are the most two famous oils we use, so that brings a nice flavor also. Till the time this is getting hot, what we'll do is we'll finely slice the onions. The root is on for the onion. What I'll do is I'll take the root off by cutting a certain part of the onion. Why? Because the root holds it together. I want the slices to fall apart. So if you keep the root on, what will happen is the onion won't cut properly. So whenever you're doing it, do it finely chopped for this recipe. So I'll finely chop the onion. Try keeping an eye contact always when you're chopping, and if you're too good at it, then you can take your eye contact off. But remember, it takes a lot of years. Why? Because you can cut your hand, and precision comes with time. So the onion is done. I'll add the onion to the pan and I shall wait till it gets really light brown. Okay, so as you can see, the water has come to heat. What I'll do is I'll reduce the heat to low, and till the time the butter melts, what we'll do is we shall transfer the cow brain over here. So always remember, when you transfer the cow brain, you need to add it as a whole. It's a very delicate organ of the animal, so do not play with it too much, because trust me, it will start breaking. But first what you need to do is you need to add a pinch of salt to the water. Let's say 2 pinches. Why? Because the salt will give it a nice seasoning, and transfer the brain from your hand. Why? Because it starts breaking otherwise. I'll just slowly transfer it and try avoiding overlap. Why? Because if it starts touching each other, or if it's over each other like 2 pieces of brain, it will break. Just give it like 2 minutes on high heat, and once it comes to heat, then I'll tell you what to do. So as you can see, I've kept the lid on top. Why? Because I want the heat to start getting captured inside. And on the other hand, the clarified butter has come to heat. Always remember, if you've rinsed your hands, always dry it out. Why? Because if you splash some water in it, it will come over you. And as I've told you before, it's very hurtful or painful when the water goes into the oil and that splash comes on you. Because remember one thing, getting burned from different types of things has a different effect. If you're getting burned by steam, that is different. If you're getting burned by oil, that is different. If you're burned by direct fire, that's different. The healing time takes more. So I prefer following some rules, and that way you can do a better job. Okay, now what you'll do is you'll add like 2 pinches of salt, spread it out. Why? Because I want the onions to get brown, and the only way to get it brown is you need to saute them with some salt. Why? Because it brings out the moisture, remember that. Just shake it up. Now I'll take a spatula, and as you can see, the onions are actually splitting. So reduce the heat to low. On the other hand, the brain is boiling properly. What we'll do next is we shall start chopping a few things. What I need is, first I need finely chopped garlic. I shall just put it on the board, place it like this, and I shall just press it. What will happen is, when it is pressed properly, you chop it, it takes less time, and you get a nice cut also. So just start chopping the garlic. Keep your eye on the onions. Why? Remember one thing, you don't want it to change in color. If you think the oil is getting too hot and it's turning brown very quickly, you can also switch the stove off, and you can transfer the pan to a stove which is closed, which is actually not burning. Why? Because the pan is already at heat and you want to maintain the temperature. So I'll add some room temperature garlic to bring the temperature down. I shall now mix it, because I want the flavor to enhance and I want the oil to have this nice garlic flavor. So till the time this is cooking, now what we'll do is we shall drain the water out from here. I shall show you how the cow brain looks. I keep saying goat brain. Why? Because in our country you use goat and cow brain both. Okay, so always remember, transfer it with something very efficient. Why? Because you do not want to ruin the whole texture of the thing. So I'll just take the water out, and then I'll show you how it looks. So as you can see that the color of the onion changes very quickly when it turns light brown to dark brown. Why? Because the moisture is almost out, so it takes around a minute maximum. But when it's translucent, it takes around 4 to 5 minutes to come to light brown. So the transition is very quick. Always keep an eye. On the other side, I've taken out the brain, and how do you need to use it, I'll let you know. But first what you need to do is you need to deal with all the other things. So as you can see, the temperature is down. Now what you need to do is you need to add something that will bring down the temperature of the pan. The next thing that goes in is the tomatoes. Why? Because I want the tomatoes to go in and enhance the flavor. But before that, what you'll do is you shall add some dried red chilies. So what I'll do is I'll take 5 pieces of dried red chilies. These are round dried chilies found in Pakistan. If you don't find this type of red chili, what you can do is you can find the normal thin one which is dried. Why? Because you want that color, you want that texture, and you want that spice level in your recipe. Remember one more thing, that the thinner and the smaller the chili is, the more powerful it is, the more spicy it is. So if you want like a very spicy recipe or very spicy taste, keep the small ones. If you want just the fragrance of the chili, choose the bigger ones. Remember this. And now what we'll do is I shall just slowly cut this into 3 pieces each, and I will add it to the pan. Some people add it directly, but I'm cutting it. Why? Because when you cut it, what happens is the flavor and the spices increase. Why? Because now all the seeds which hold the whole aroma, the spice, are frying in the oil. So I'll just add it and I'll just mix it up a bit so that the onion also gets the flavor. Increase the heat again to bring the pan to heat, because I put it on pilot because I don't want to change the color. And once it's like 30 seconds in it, I shall put the stove back to the pilot. When I say pilot, pilot means it's just so low that it maintains the heat, but it doesn't increase the heat of the pan. So even if you want to switch it off, you could do that, because some stoves do not have it. As you can see, it's come to boil. I'll again put it to pilot. I need to maintain the color. Now what you'll do is you shall take the stem off from the tomatoes, and then what we'll do is we shall finely chop them. Remember one thing, for this recipe, you finely chop it. Why? Because you cannot start mashing it with the brain. Why? Because the brain is very delicate, and if you mash it with the brain should start breaking apart. Okay, now just take the eye of the tomato out. We have nice beefy tomatoes, and as everyone knows, Pakistan has a lot of locally grown vegetables which are of very high quality. And the funny part is 40% of the AAA grade product is exported out of Pakistan, and whatever is remaining is then provided to people over here. Why? Because the demand for our vegetables and the fruits are very high across the world. And at times, whenever you see mangoes or basmati rice wherever in the world, remember 60% of it comes from Pakistan, even though people label it as something else. Okay, so it's finely chopped. Basically what happens is people buy it in bulk. When they buy it in bulk, they import it in their other countries, the rice, mangoes and wheat, all of these things. When they arrive in different countries, they are packaged over there. And when they're being packaged, the people who have imported it put different types of origins on it just to increase the sales. But if you talk about these championships which happen in the world, where people take their seed and they take their product for exposure and to show it, you'll see that there will be a lot of people at the counters where you see Pakistani fruit, rice and all these agricultural products. Why? Because we try using as less fertilizer as we can on our fields, and apart from that, the way we grow our crop is through fresh water, not through hydroponics. And when we use fresh water, that means we have a lot of fresh water that comes from the mountains from Kashmir. Okay, so increase the heat, add salt around a 1/4 teaspoon, mix it up. Now you have to spread the tomatoes out so that they get heat equally, remember that. Give it a lid. Reduce the heat to medium-low. And now, remember one thing, you have ginger, but the whole piece won't go in. What I'll do is I shall just cut it from the center, and half of it will go right now and the remaining will go later. Okay, so just finely slice it, as fine as you can go. And when I talk about slicing it really fine, and if the product is very small, keep an eye contact. That's very important. It increases precision and it makes sure that each piece of the ginger, garlic or whatever you're chopping is equal. Okay, this is done. Now what I'll do is I shall transfer this to the onions. What will happen is it will increase the flavor and the aroma of the recipe will also increase. Until the time this is cooking, because I need to give it around 3 minutes on heat, go for a short break, and once we're back, I'll tell you what to do. Keep watching Indus Cuisine. Welcome back. You're watching Indus Cuisine and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. During the break, I just waited for you and I kept the tomatoes cooking. Why? Because I want the tomatoes to get really tender and start breaking down. So now if you have a look, you need to see that the onions and the tomatoes are nicely soft, and now you shall mash them. Remember, you will mash them before adding the brain. Why? Because the brain is so tender, if you start mashing it, it will turn into a paste, which we don't want. We want a nice texture, and that's what we shall do. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll start mixing it and start mashing it slowly and gradually. Why? Because we want a nice texture, and once you've mashed it, let it cook for another 3 minutes. Okay, now flip it, and when this is done, I shall just mix it up once more and let it cook. Give it a lid, reduce the heat to medium now, and now add the green chilies. But remember, you will add the green chilies only when, if you see over here, the oil splits. Why? Because I want the green chilies to get a nice chance to fry properly. So we shall add the green chilies after slitting them. You're not going to chop them. So you'll take a paring knife first and take the sticks out from the green chilies for this recipe. The green chilies must be thoroughly washed. They look a bit different today. Why? Because it's natural produce in Pakistan. We do not use a lot of preservatives or fertilizer. We try keeping it as nicely close to the nature as possible. So you shall see a little bit of imperfection, but when you see imperfection, that's where the taste comes in. Okay, so just cut it slightly, make a small cut incision, you could say. Why? Because that will let the oil and the heat go inside the green chili, and it will enhance the flavor, it will enhance the texture of the recipe, and that's what we require. This is in, we're cooking it properly. And now add all of this to the pan. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to press the green chilies down so that it gets a nice chance of frying, and then start mixing it so that I cover it with oil properly. This is done. Now what you need to do is you need to put it on the side. Try getting some clarified butter on one end, press it. Why? Because I want to fry the spices now. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll increase the heat, and firstly what I'll do is I'll add 3 pieces of black cardamom towards the oil. Why? Because when it will fry, the flavor will enhance, and then you should add some other ingredients. You can keep the heat high, but not very high. Keep it like towards medium high, and then add the cumin powder. The cumin powder must be added to the oil so that when it fries, the flavor gets really nice and intense. Okay, and then we need black pepper. Okay, black pepper, I won't be crushing it, I shall be adding it directly to the pan. Why? Because when you take a bite and you get that nice black pepper texture in your mouth, the flavor is like boom. Okay, so add it to the oil, let it fry on high heat for 30 seconds. And now I shall mix it properly. Okay, mix it. You want the flavor, you want the spices to get nicely amalgamated. And now add the bay leaf. The bay leaf goes now, and the turmeric powder also goes in. Turmeric powder shall be properly added towards where the oil is mostly. Mix it up. And start breaking it down a little bit. Now reduce the heat. So now when everything is inside the pan, you need to add the cow brain. But remember, the cow brain doesn't go like this. You need to pick the board up, switch the boards, and place a red board over here. Now when the red board is over here, what you'll do is you shall add the brain, place it here. As you can see, it's very delicate, so please use it with care. Otherwise, if it starts breaking, the whole texture of the recipe will change. I'll use another knife today. Now cut it like this and make small pieces. Do not mash it, because eventually when you add it to the pan, it shall change texture. Slowly and gradually keep going. And as I said, you've never heard about this recipe. Why? Because it's actually very traditional when it comes to Pakistan. Okay, I'll keep this knife at the back. I don't want to mix it with other things, and I shall just transfer all of this over here. So I'll pick up the board, I'll add it to the pan. I cannot even pick it up with the knife. Why? Because you can see it's starting to disintegrate. It's breaking. It's so soft. It's just like some soft, cheesy things you eat in life. Okay, this is done. I'll keep it over here at the back. So now once you've added the brain in it, you need to just mix it very slowly. And when you're mixing it, remember you need to fold it. Do not mix it while breaking it, just fold it. Why? Because when you start folding it, the brain won't break and the flavor will actually get mixed very nicely. And eventually we shall turn it into this nice small texture, but right now I want the flavors to get mixed and the flavor of the brain to be also mixed properly with it. And because you know why? Because once you start mashing it, the texture changes, and towards the end when you're cooking it for 10 minutes more, it will turn into a paste. You don't want a paste, you want this block-like texture, like Lego, in the pan. Okay, now I'll just slowly turn it around. And now what I'll do is I'll add half a cup of water. Now when you add the water, you don't add it in the middle. Try adding it towards the edges of the pan slowly. Eventually it will come in the middle, but what will happen is when the water is poured on the outside edges, the spice or the masala which is sticking outside will start melting. It will come in and eventually it will come in the center and you'll get all the spice properly. Because if you add towards the middle, the spices that stick on the wall of the pan will remain there, and that's the real flavor you want to mix back into the recipe. Okay, now I'll just move it around slowly. Now you can see when I've added the water, it's actually turned a little thick. Why? Because that's the way the brain affects everything. It even affects our body. Why? Because that's how we think. Okay, so just mix it up. Give it a lid. Reduce the heat to low and let it cook for 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, so till the time this is cooking, what I'll do is I'll just clear out a few things and then I'll let you know what to do next. So now as you can see, I've given it like 5 minutes. I'll take the lid off and I'll let the water evaporate. While the water is evaporating, what we'll do is we shall start breaking the brain down, but very slowly into pieces. Why? Because now the brain shall start cooking and it shall start changing its texture. You need to remember that it's not like normal meat you cook, it's a little different. So you need to give it a lot of care, a lot of time and a lot of attention. So I'm not mashing it, I'm just slowly and gradually pushing the wooden spatula down and I'm just taking it off when it's sticking to each other. So also please understand that you do not want to break the green chilies. Once this is done, now slowly and gradually start hitting it. What will happen is it won't change into a mushy texture, it won't change into like a cheesy texture, but it will get properly cooked on high heat then. I'm just going to push it down. Okay, this is done. Now increase the heat and start mixing it. Add some salt. Why? Because you added very less salt in the beginning, so let's say another quarter teaspoon. I always say salt to taste. You need to taste it as you go, and I'll tell you a secret. I do not taste it on screen. Whenever I take a break, I do taste it. Why? Because I need to see everything is cooked to perfection, because my rule is whatever I cook, even if it's on screen, it needs to go to use, not to waste. Because many cooking shows, what they do is they just focus on the look of the recipe and towards the end they waste it. But I believe that you shouldn't waste food. Why? Because natural resources are already very scarce in the world. And as you can see that extra globalization and extreme industrialization in the world has led to a lot of problems in the world by, you could say, global warming and a lot of deforestation. And this all happens when you do not respect an ingredient you're cooking. And when you need to respect an ingredient, you need to remember that you need to give your 100% and do it properly. Okay, now as you can see, the water has evaporated. I'm just going to now start mixing it thoroughly. And just keep an eye. You can see these bubbles on the pan. These bubbles are the oil that is coming out. Wherever you see the brain getting too close to each other, just start breaking it down. Why? Because I want the flavor to get in properly. Okay, so this is cooking. I'm mixing it as we go. Always keep your eye down here. And now mix it up again. Reduce the heat And now you want the remaining ginger. The remaining ginger shall be added in very thin slices, remember that? So just make like these planks, you could say, and then start cutting it through. You should add it towards the end because you want the fresh aroma of fresh ginger going in. Okay, now you should add some yogurt. When I say yogurt, let's say around half a cup. This is 1 cup. I won't be taking the whole thing. So what I'll do is I'll add it. Put it on the side and now add the ginger. Ginger goes in. Now mix it up again and let it cook for 2 minutes. Till the time this is cooking, what we'll do is we'll clear out everything and I'll show you the final look of the recipe. Don't go anywhere. So as you can see, today's recipe is ready. It was very easy, but you need to remember one thing. When you use brain, you need to first boil it for 2 minutes. Once it's done, you let it rest on the side for like around 5 to 6 minutes, let it cool down. Drain the water out. Do not rinse it again, but remember you have to drain the water. And if you see any foam on top, yes, I'm saying the right thing, foam on top, you will take that out also and try not adding it to the recipe. Why? Because that is all the extra fat. Okay, apart from that, what you need to do is whenever you make brain, you need to add the tomatoes. When you add the tomatoes, they need to be really hot. You need to fry them properly in the clarified butter and you need to break them down properly. Why? Because once you break them down, then only you can add the brain. Why? Because otherwise the texture will change. And you know, when does the tomato break down? When it starts losing its moisture, and that is when the flavor comes in. When the brain is added, you let the brain cook with a half cup of water for at least 5 to 6 minutes on high heat with the lid on. Remember, if you keep the lid on, then only it will be 5 to 6 minutes. If you take the lid off, what will happen is the water will evaporate within 2 minutes and you don't want that. Then once it's done, you know that the brain is cooked, you start cutting it down with a spatula, a wooden spatula. Why? Because you want the flavor to get inside and integrate properly. When it is done, what I did towards the end was I added just a little bit of oil, let's say around 3 tablespoons. We call it tempering and we call it tadka in our own Urdu language. We added just like you could say a quarter teaspoon of fresh cumin, basically dried cumin, and just around a quarter teaspoon of saunf. Saunf is also known as a mouth freshener in our own country. And then I just added over on the top and it was ready. I hope you liked today's episode. If you want to learn something more, you could go to our official Indus News page on YouTube and you can go search my name Basim Akhund or the show's name Indus Cuisine, and you can find all the episodes with the name what I made today or in any other episode with the episode number, and you can go comment over there if you want to learn something new, and I'll pick it up from there and I'll teach you what and how to do it. I hope you liked today's episode. I'll see you in another episode of Indus Cuisine. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye, lovely people.